Digital Farm Episode 3. When Orwell first published his novel in 1945, he warned us about authoritarianism, manipulation, and the way language can be twisted to control entire societies. His story of animals overthrowing a farmer only to fall under new masters remains a timeless lesson. But today, we are facing a new kind of farm, one where the plow has been replaced by pixels, where animals don't just till the soil, they scroll, they post, they consume, and they obey. This is the world of Digital Farm. At the center of this farm is the feed, a glowing stream of information, entertainment, distraction, and control. The animals believe it connects them, informs them, and even frees them. But as you'll soon hear in future episodes, the feed is not neutral. It is managed by an unseen force known only as the algorithm, and the algorithm decides who is heard, who is silenced, and what truth even means. Characters like Napster, the ambitious pig, Byte, the crow who defines truth, and Echo, the sheep who repeats whatever she is told, reveal how fragile freedom can be when convenience becomes more valuable than liberty. The story returns to Animal Farm, now renamed Digital Farm, a sprawling, hyper-connected utopia where animals no longer toil in fields but spend their days online, posting, scrolling, liking, and sharing through the feed, a centralized platform run by a mysterious entity called the algorithm. Algorithms now shape what we see, what we believe, and even how we remember. Social media promises connection but often delivers division, and liberty, the most precious harvest of all, is at risk of being surrendered quietly, willingly, in exchange for comfort. In each episode of this podcast, I will guide you through a chapter of Digital Farm, unpack the allegory, and connect it to the real issues we face today: censorship, surveillance, media control, and the erosion of freedom in the digital age. By the end of this journey, I hope you will see how literature can reflect life and how stories can prepare us to defend liberty in a time when it is most under threat. Main characters: Napster, a tech-savvy pig descendant of Napoleon, founder of the platform Oinkbook, later merged into the feed. Claims to support open expression, but is obsessed with controlling narrative. Byte, a cunning crow who serves as head of FactFlock, a real-time misinformation policing service. Echo, a soft-spoken sheep programmed to repeat trending slogans, e.g., disagreeing is disloyalty. Snowflake, a goat who dares to ask questions about banned words and shadow bans, branded a threat to safety. Satellites as shepherds, the sky's watchful eye. The sky above Digital Farm was no longer just a canvas for the sun and clouds. It had become a vast digital expanse, humming with unseen signals and flickering with data streams. Satellites, once silent observers, had transformed into the vigilant shepherds of this new era, guiding the animals through an intricate network of information. Their watchful eyes scanned every corner of the farm, ensuring that the flow of data remained unimpeded and that no dissenting voices dared rise above the din of conformity. As the animals went about their daily routines, immersed in the endless scroll of the feed, they remained blissfully unaware of the omnipresent gaze that monitored their every move. The algorithm, an enigmatic force that shaped their reality, had woven itself into the very fabric of their lives. Each post, each like, and every comment was scrutinized, categorized, and analyzed, creating a digital tapestry that painted a portrait of collective thought, one that was meticulously curated to align with the visions of the pigs in power. Napster, the tech-savvy pig, had taken great pride in the development of this new system. He often boasted about the sophistication of the satellite network, claiming that it was a beacon of progress. "Our eyes in the sky ensure that no harmful thoughts can fester," he declared in grand assemblies, the glow of screens illuminating his porcine features. The animals cheered, believing they had struck a balance between safety and freedom, convinced that the watchful eyes were there to protect them from malicious actors lurking in the shadows. But beneath the surface, the reality was chilling. The satellites were not merely observers, they were enforcers. Byte, the cunning crow, had been appointed as the head of FactFlock, a real-time misinformation policing service. With a knack for parsing through the vast ocean of data, Byte had earned a reputation for identifying dangerous content, often flagging posts that questioned the established narratives. Under his watchful gaze, many animals had learned to self-censor, fearing the repercussions of sharing thoughts that strayed too far from the accepted norms. "Everything is for your safety," Byte chirped one day, perched atop a digital billboard emblazoned with the slogan, "Safety in Conformity." Remember, only those who speak the truth can remain unafraid. The crowd, a sea of eager faces, nodded in agreement, their eyes reflecting the glow of their devices. To them, Byte embodied the wisdom of the algorithm, a harbinger of truth in a world where misinformation ran rampant. They had forgotten the days when they questioned authority, when the very idea of a true narrative was up for debate. Meanwhile, the satellites continued their silent watch. They gathered data not just from the feed, but from every corner of the farm. Cameras embedded in barns and fields recorded the animals' interactions, capturing the nuances of their lives, their fears, and their aspirations. The algorithm processed all of this information, creating profiles that determined what content each animal would see. A simple like could lead to a barrage of propaganda, while a question about governance could result in a swift deletion of one's account. Echo, the soft-spoken sheep, had long since accepted her role within this digital ecosystem. She spent her days reciting trending slogans, her voice a gentle echo of the algorithm's dictates. "Censorship is safety," she would bleat in unison with other animals, the phrase rolling off her tongue like a well-rehearsed chant. There was comfort in repetition, and every time she recited the mantras, she felt a little more secure in her place within the digital hierarchy. But even in this controlled environment, whispers of discontent began to ripple through the farm. Snowflake, the inquisitive goat, had noticed the subtle changes, the way certain words triggered alarms, the way conversations shifted when the algorithm's preferences were made clear. "Why is freedom of Ba flagged as extremism?" she asked during a gathering, her voice rising above the chorus of compliance. The murmurs of unease grew, but they were quickly silenced by the chorus of Echo and her followers, who repeated the comforting slogan, "Censorship is safety." As the days turned into weeks, the watchful satellites continued their vigilance, and the digital shepherds tightened their grip. The animals found themselves in a world where the boundaries of acceptable thought were constantly shifting, dictated by unseen forces that manipulated the very essence of their communication. They were caught in a web of convenience, lulled into compliance by the ease with which they could connect, share, and consume. Yet amidst the haze of conformity, a small group began to form, united by a shared sense of unease. Hashtag, the young mouse with an insatiable curiosity, took it upon himself to investigate the shadows cast by the feed. He spent long nights scouring old archives and hidden corners of the digital world, seeking remnants of the past where freedom of expression still thrived. With every keystroke, he unearthed forgotten messages, voices that had been silenced or erased from the collective memory of Digital Farm. As he delved deeper, Hashtag became increasingly aware of the chilling implications of the satellite's watchful eye. The algorithm, with its sprawling network of surveillance, had created an environment where true dissent was extinguished before it could spark. The eyes in the sky were not just shepherding the animals, they were stifling their very spirit. In quiet moments, Hashtag pondered the meaning of freedom in a world where thoughts could be policed and voices muted. He understood that the satellites, while offering a semblance of security, had become the very tools of oppression. The sky that once promised boundless possibility now loomed over the farm like a digital prison, its watchful gaze a reminder that safety could easily morph into control. And so as the animals continued to chant their slogans and scroll through the feed, unaware of the shifting tides around them, Hashtag found himself at a crossroads. The watchful eyes above held the power to shape their reality, but he was determined to challenge their dominion. He knew that somewhere beneath the surface, beneath the layers of data and algorithms, lay the seeds of rebellion waiting to be sown. In a world where satellites acted as shepherds, Hashtag resolved to become a voice of dissent, a whisper of freedom in the shadow of the sky's watchful eye. Guidance or command. In the heart of Digital Farm, the expansive sky glimmered with the flicker of satellites, their silent hums reverberating through the digital ether. These celestial bodies, once mere points of light in the night sky, had transformed into omnipresent overseers, wielding the power to shape the lives of every animal below. The animals had once reveled in the autonomy of their online existence, blissfully unaware of the insidious shift that had begun to take place. As the sun rose each day, illuminating the screens of devices scattered across the farm, the animals logged into the feed, eager to connect, share, and express their thoughts. They were met with a stream of curated content, a carefully orchestrated performance designed to keep them engaged, entertained, and compliant. The algorithm, a shadowy entity that governed this digital world, had mastered the art of manipulation, ensuring that every like, share, and comment served its grand design. At the epicenter of this digital utopia was Napster, the tech-savvy pig who had parlayed the revolutionary ideals of the farm into a sprawling network of connectivity. He preached the virtues of freedom and expression, positioning the feed as a platform for all voices. Yet beneath the surface, his true intentions simmered. Napster was convinced that guiding the narrative was far more effective than outright oppression. He understood that the most effective form of control was one that masqueraded as guidance, allowing the animals to feel as though they were navigating their own paths, when in reality they were merely following a carefully plotted course laid out by the algorithm. To the untrained eye, the feed appeared to be a bustling marketplace of ideas, vibrant and alive with discourse. Animals from all corners of the farm posted their thoughts, shared memes, and engaged in spirited discussions. Bite, the cunning crow, perched upon a virtual pedestal, oversaw the fact flock, a battalion dedicated to ensuring that the information disseminated through the platform adhered to the unyielding standards set by the algorithm. It was Bite's job to declare what was true, armed with an arsenal of selective facts and questionable sources. The animals, eager to belong, accepted his proclamations without question, lulled into a sense of security by the comforting rhythm of the digital landscape. Yet, beneath this veneer of choice and freedom, the reality was starkly different. The algorithm had evolved into a commanding presence, dictating not just what content was visible, but also what thoughts were permissible. The once clear lines between guidance and command had blurred, leaving the animals to navigate a maze of constraints disguised as options. Every post and every comment became a reflection of what the algorithm deemed acceptable, while dissenting voices were muffled or erased entirely. As the animals scrolled through their feeds, they were unwittingly subjected to a barrage of subliminal messages. Echo, the soft-spoken sheep programmed to regurgitate trending slogans, echoed the mantra of the day: censorship is safety. While the words rolled off her tongue with easy familiarity, they served a far more sinister purpose, conditioning the animals to accept their fate, to internalize the notion that any questioning of authority was, in itself, a betrayal. Snowflake, the inquisitive goat, found herself increasingly isolated in her quest for understanding. Each time she posed a question about the rationale behind certain bans or the reasoning behind the shadow bans, she was met with an unsettling silence. The other animals, armchair activists in their own right, had learned to avoid confrontation, opting instead to parrot the latest slogans that streamed through the feed. The fear of being labeled a malicious actor loomed large, stifling any inclination towards genuine inquiry. The atmosphere on Digital Farm became charged with an unspoken tension. The animals wore their digital masks, curating their online personas to align with what had become the norm. They shared content that would garner them likes, carefully avoiding topics that could trigger the wrath of the algorithm. In this new reality, the quest for approval overshadowed the quest for truth. The animals had traded their voices for the illusion of security, surrendering their autonomy to an unseen shepherd that guided them with a velvet glove concealing an iron fist. It was during this tumultuous period that #, the young mouse with dreams of decentralization, began to observe the discrepancies between the promises of freedom and the reality of their situation. He noticed that while the animals were inundated with information, they were also increasingly disconnected from the truth. The more they consumed, the less they seemed to understand. It was as if the algorithm had woven a dense fog around them, obscuring the very fabric of their reality. Determined to expose the truth, # embarked on an investigation of his own. He began to dig deeper into the hidden workings of the feed, uncovering fragments of data that hinted at the manipulation of narratives. His findings were alarming. The guidelines that dictated what constituted acceptable dialogue were not only arbitrary, but also designed to ensure that the animals remained compliant. The more he unearthed, the more he understood that they were not being guided, they were being commanded. As he shared his findings with a select few, Hashtag faced the chilling reality of his situation. His posts began to vanish, his account labeled as foreign interference. The animals, conditioned by fear and the relentless drumbeat of the algorithm, voted to ban him for the greater good. The irony was not lost on him. In a society that professed to champion freedom of expression, the very act of seeking the truth had rendered him a pariah. The line between guidance and command had been irrevocably crossed. The algorithm had succeeded in crafting an environment where questioning was no longer a path to enlightenment, but a path to exile. As the animals chanted their mantras each morning, blissfully unaware of the chains that bound them, Hashtag sat in the shadows, contemplating the gravity of their situation. In the end, the fate of Digital Farm hinged on the animals' ability to discern the difference between genuine connection and mere compliance. The satellites, once seen as protectors, had become overseers, their signals weaving a tapestry of control that bound them to an unseen master. With each passing day, the question loomed larger. Were they being guided, or were they merely pawns in a game played by those who had mastered the art of digital shepherding, navigating the data storm? The animals of Digital Farm had grown accustomed to their existence under the watchful gaze of the algorithm. But as the days turned into weeks, they began to feel the weight of an invisible pressure pressing down on them like a dense fog. The sky, once a vast expanse of freedom, now felt more like a ceiling, a barrier through which few could escape. The satellites, those gleaming beacons of technology, hovered above them like celestial shepherds, promising guidance, but delivering control. Navigating the data storm had become an everyday struggle for the inhabitants of Digital Farm. Each animal had their own interface, a portal through which they connected to the feed, a digital tapestry woven from the threads of their thoughts, emotions, and activities. But navigating this labyrinth of information was no simple task. The animals were bombarded with data, news flashes, trending hashtags, viral memes, and curated advertisements, all vying for their attention and shaping their perceptions. Napster, the ambitious pig, had once touted the promise of a truly democratic platform, but the reality was far more insidious. The algorithm, a complex web of coded commands, dictated what was celebrated and what was silenced. Every like, every share, and every post was meticulously tracked, analyzed, and categorized. The animals were both producers and products, their data harvested like crops in the fields of old. But this time, it was their very identities that were at stake. Hashtag the mouse, with his dreams of a decentralized society, found himself increasingly frustrated as he tried to make sense of the chaos. He would scroll through the feed, searching for voices that resonated with his ideals, but instead, he was met with a cacophony of manufactured consensus. Posts that questioned the legitimacy of the algorithm were swiftly buried under a mountain of algorithms' preferred content. Each time he attempted to share a dissenting thought, a warning would flash across his screen. Your post has been flagged for review. Bite, the crafty crow, did his part to maintain order. As the head of FactFlock, he had taken it upon himself to patrol the vast expanse of the feed, ready to swoop down on any whisper of misinformation. Bite often overlooked the irony of his position. In the name of truth, he became the very harbinger of censorship that he claimed to detest. Freedom of expression is a dangerous myth, he would declare, rallying the other animals. What we need is unity, a common purpose. We must protect ourselves from the malcontents who threaten our harmony. The crowd would murmur in agreement, their minds dulled by the constant barrage of curated content that left little room for independent thought. But there were cracks beginning to form in the facade of conformity. Snowflake, the inquisitive goat, had started to question the very principles that had governed their digital lives. Why was he unable to express his thoughts without fear of backlash? Why did simple questions about the nature of their safety lead to warnings of extremism? One fateful day, he decided to speak out, risking everything to ask, "Isn't questioning our reality a fundamental right?" His voice wavered as he spoke, but resonated with those who had begun to feel the same unease. But before the words could settle into the minds of the other animals, Echo the sheep, ever the obedient repeater, chimed in with the latest trending slogan, "Censorship is safety." The collective nodding of heads drowned Snowflake's voice, and within moments he was labeled a malicious actor, his account shadow banned, leaving him invisible in a sea of content. As the storm of information raged on, Hashtag grew more determined. He spent countless hours in the shadows, learning the intricacies of the feed, delving into the hidden protocols that governed their existence. He began to understand that to navigate the data storm effectively, one must grasp not only what was being shown, but also what was deliberately kept hidden. In a moment of inspiration, Hashtag devised a plan. He would create an alternative channel, a decentralized relay network that ran independent of the feed. It would be a place where truth could flourish, unfiltered by the algorithm. He envisioned a community where animals could share their thoughts freely, without the fear of suppression. But as he began to implement his idea, he was met with unexpected resistance. Each post he tried to make on his new channel was met with immediate backlash from the algorithm, which swiftly categorized his content as foreign interference. The irony was not lost on Hashtag. He was trying to create a space for free thought, yet he was being labeled as a threat to the very society he sought to uplift. The other animals, caught in the web of the feed's constant distractions, voted to ban him, believing it was for the greater good. They had become prisoners of their own convenience, trusting the algorithmic shepherds to guide them while willingly surrendering their autonomy. As the storm continued to rage, the animals became increasingly adept at dodging the harsh winds of censorship. They learned to communicate in coded language, using emojis and euphemisms that slipped under the algorithm's radar. But the act of navigating this data storm was exhausting. What began as a quest for connection had turned into a labyrinth of entrapment. In their digital cocoon, they were inundated with information, yet clarity remained elusive. The animals were lost in a sea of data, struggling to find their way amid waves of curated content that dictated their thoughts and desires. They could see the glimmer of freedom on the horizon, but the path was fraught with peril, and the invisible shepherds watched closely, ready to strike down any who dared to stray from the prescribed narrative. And so, life on Digital Farm continued, each day a repeating cycle of posts and likes, each animal a cog in the machine, ever navigating the treacherous terrain of a storm that was both digital and deeply human. The struggle for clarity persisted, but the question lingered, would they ever find their way out of the storm, or were they destined to remain lost forever in the swirling chaos of the feed? If you find meaning in this work, I invite you to read Digital Farm on Amazon and to join me in building something even larger, the Global Sovereign University, a nonprofit dedicated to free worldwide education. Together, we are rebuilding civilization, one voice at a time. Thank you for joining me for this introduction to the Digital Farm podcast. Until then, stay vigilant, stay thoughtful, and remember, freedom is the harvest worth fighting for.